What's weird, an entire generation got told they were special, then worked harder than anyone expected, and somehow ended up unable to afford the same life that seemed completely normal just one generation earlier. That's a psychology experiment nobody signed up for. I'm talking about millennials, people born between 1981 and 1996. And before you roll your eyes, stay with me because this gets uncomfortable in ways you probably haven't thought about. Millennials became the first generation in modern American history expected to be worse off financially than the generation before them. The Pew Research Center confirmed this back in 2020, which means we've got an entire demographic walking around with this bizarre psychological cocktail of achievement and failure mixed together in their heads every single day. Imagine being told your whole childhood that you could be anything, win anything, achieve anything, and then graduating into a recession where the participation trophy suddenly becomes a master's degree that costs more than a house used to. The psychological term for this is cognitive dissonance, and millennials are basically swimming in it. But here's where your brain should perk up, because this goes deeper than student loans and avocado toast jokes. Psychologist Jean Twenge literally wrote a book called Generation Me studying this exact phenomenon. She found that millennials score higher on narcissism scales than previous generations, but, and this is the part that'll mess with you, they also score higher on anxiety and depression. So you've got a generation that simultaneously thinks they're special and feels completely worthless. A trauma response with a LinkedIn profile. Think about the actual timeline here for a second. Millennials were the test subjects for every parenting trend that came out of the self-esteem movement in the 80s and 90s. Helicopter parents, everyone gets a trophy, you're smart just for existing. These weren't bad intentions, they were earnest attempts at better parenting based on the psychology available at the time. Then millennials hit their 20s right as the economy imploded in 2008, graduated into a job market that had fundamentally changed, and suddenly found themselves navigating a completely different economic reality than the one they'd been prepared for. The whiplash alone should have hospitalized people. And social media, millennials got that right in their formative years, not as kids like Gen Z, but as teenagers and young adults when their identities were still forming. Facebook launched in 2004, Instagram in 2010. That means millennials learned how to be adults while simultaneously learning how to perform their lives for an audience. Dr. Tim Kasser's research on materialism and well-being shows that when people base their self-worth on external validation, which is literally what social media trains you to do, their mental health tanks. You're essentially running a 24/7 campaign for your own existence, and the polls never close. Now pile on the fact that millennials are delaying or completely skipping the traditional life milestones that used to give people a sense of adult identity: marriage, homeownership, having kids. Surveys show they absolutely want these things, but the economic reality makes them borderline impossible without family wealth or extraordinary luck. So you've got people in their 30s and 40s who still feel like they're waiting for their real life to start, except the waiting room is a studio apartment that costs $2,200 a month and their therapist is booked until March. The impact of prolonged uncertainty is surprisingly well documented. When achieving the markers of what society defines as adulthood becomes unattainable, your brain doesn't just shrug and move on. Instead, it creates this low-level stress that's referred to as allostatic load, your body's tendency to prepare for something that never actually comes. Sort of like being stuck in the loading screen of your own life. And when you look at the progress bar, you see it hasn't moved an inch in the past decade. But let me throw something at you that might feel a tad more personal. Millennials were sold a very specific story about how effort equals outcome. Study hard, go to college, get a good job.